signed a $250,000 contract with an advertising company run by a Mitt Romney funder to create ads promoting the harsh new laws. Take a look.
Your right to vote. It's one thing you never want to miss out on. This year, the law requires that every Pennsylvania voter show a photo ID at the polls.
In fact, Pennsylvania has nearly 760,000 people who don't have one of those valid IDs. And under the new law, nearly 1 in 10 voters could be denied the right to vote. In Philadelphia, it's closer to 2 in 10. It's about 18% of Philadelphia residents. So voters are pushing back. 93-year-old Viviette Applewhite, along with 3 other elderly women, filed a lawsuit saying that they're not going to be able to vote because, having been born in the Jim Crow South, there's no record of their births in order for them to have a birth certificate. In fact, African Americans and other typically Democratic voters are most likely to lack a valid ID under this law. 25% of African Americans don't have the proper ID. Neither do 19% of Latinos or 18% of young people and seniors. Compare that to the just 8% of whites who don't have the kind of ID that was required under this law. And you don't have to take it from me. Pennsylvania House Republican leader Mike Turzai admitted, and he bragged really, that if Republicans get their way, voter ID laws will swing the election. Take a listen.
Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania. Done.
Finally, a little honesty amid all the lies and deception. For the latest on Pennsylvania's voter suppression efforts, we're going to turn to Philadelphia City Commissioner Stephanie Singer, who is the city's top election official. Stephanie joins us from Philadelphia. Stephanie, thank you so much for coming inside the War Room.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Well, those numbers are incredible. 760,000, up to that many, could be disenfranchised. How concerned are you, and how do you know that the number is so high?
Well, I'm very concerned, and I should say that I know these numbers because they were issued by the Department of State, the Republican Department of State. And I can't say how accurate they are because, like many other things, the Department of State is not, there's a lot they're not telling us. They haven't told us yet how they actually calculated those numbers.
So, well, let's look at some of the language in the law. Here are some of the acceptable forms of photo ID. You can have a government-issued photo ID, of course issued by the state probably, like a Pennsylvania driver's license. You can have a U.S. passport, right, a military ID, a student ID from an accredited school, which is interesting, a long-term care facility photo ID. Now, Republicans argued that it shouldn't be hard to have one of those many forms of ID. What do you say to that?
Well, their own numbers show that there are a lot of people who don't have a driver's license. When they were pushing this law, they were saying, oh, only 1% of Pennsylvanians are without a driver's license, 1% of Pennsylvania voters. So they kept saying 1%, 1%, even up to a week ago when the Secretary of State had the numbers that you quoted in hand. She was still publicly trying to say 1%, but in fact it's closer to 10%. And that's just in Pennsylvania. That in Philadelphia, it's 18%, as you said. And there are other things. The list is very short and complicated and cruel. So college and university students can use their IDs if there's an expiration date, but a cosmetology student or an auto mechanic student can't use their ID. Why is that?
So give me some examples of who specifically is going to be disenfranchised by this law.
Well, we are spending a lot of time helping Americans who were born in Puerto Rico because, among other complications, PennDOT, which is our DMV, doesn't accept Puerto Rican birth certificates issued before 2010. So if you were born in Puerto Rico and you haven't gotten a new birth certificate in a while, then you have to get your birth certificate. So there are different populations are hit in different ways.
That's amazing.
Yes.
How was the GOP able to get the law passed? I mean, was it just a party line vote? Is it a fully Republican legislature?
Yes, it's a fully Republican legislature with a Republican governor. In one sense, the part of this law that's trying to disenfranchise Philadelphia, what gives me hope is that it's getting a lot of people to think about Philadelphia and that we should get the power we deserve as Americans, and that means that we need to vote. So Philadelphia has not come out to vote in the past the way it can and should.
Well,
and that's why we have a Republican governor and why we have Republican majority on the courts also,
your
which are elected
office,
in Pennsylvania.
Because you're the chief elected official or responsible elections officer in Philadelphia, your office is responsible for making sure that every registered voter in Philadelphia is able to vote. So for your office, how difficult is this law going to make it be to guarantee that that happens?
It makes it very difficult, and the state has done everything they could to delay giving us the information we need, giving us the list of who these voters are who need ID to vote so that we and concerned groups can contact them and get them to the DMV to get their ID that they'll need for voting.
So you've got a time issue then as well. So you've only got a few months. You've got to get the word out that people may all of a sudden be subject to this. You've got to identify the people. You've got to help them get the right kind of ID. Do you have the resources to be able to do all of that? I mean, 760,000 people is huge.
No, we don't have the resources in-house, but there are a lot of groups that are coming together to help out. One of the things that's really frustrating about this law is that it does enforce it's an unfunded mandate on us, and the state has been, the cost of the law was grossly underestimated by the Republican legislature and the Republican governor, and they're not helping us. They're not really interested.
Well, of course not. They've got an agenda on this. They specifically wanted to make sure that they were able to control who came to the polls. What advice do you have for Pennsylvania voters who do not have the valid kind of photo ID? What would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them, first of all, to go to votespa.com. That's the state website to see what the rules are. And then to go there, they can find a link to the PennDOT website to find out what they'll need. And I would urge them that if they have trouble getting the documentation they need, to contact a state rep, a state legislator in Philadelphia, to please contact my office. We need to know who's having trouble and why.
Well, it's a good reason that the NAACP is focused on this issue this week. That's Philadelphia City Commissioner Stephanie Singer. Thank you so much for joining us. People, I hope you're mad about this because how fundamental can this right to vote be? It's driving me crazy. Okay. There is nothing our digital team loves more than hammering away at an injustice on social media. And right now, they've got their sights set on Pennsylvania. So go to current.com/thewar room to find out what you can do to help. And then